everyone, and welcome to another episode of Taco Matta Tuesday, the show where we eat healthy, delicious tacos and have conversations about life. When you are on the verge of throwing in the towel, I need for you to remember this incredibly important fact. Every person who has ever become a champion in this lifetime was once a contender that just refused to give up. That is exactly what I was a few weeks ago. I was just a contender, and I was able to put all the pieces together after a lot of hard work and resilience and walked out of Deca World Championships as a 2-time Deca World Champ with 2 titles. That is what I want to talk about this week. Last week, I talked so much about my experience, the Golden Nugget takeaways. I hope you had the chance to listen. If not, be sure to go back and listen to that episode. This week, though, what I want to talk about is how I became a world champ in 2 different disciplines. Because I know that a lot of us are getting ready to settle in for our next upcoming goals for 2025, as a lot of us are entering into new seasons. And I want for each and every single one of us to focus on what's most important, what's most true to you, and what's going to allow for you to become the best champion that you can be, right? So we're going to dive into that. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the taco of the week. So I introduced Dave to crock-pot meals. Yes, that man has never owned a crock pot before in his life, and I about changed it this weekend because I brought mine, and we made a very delicious let me see if I can pronounce this correctly without stumbling over my words today. A honey sesame chicken dish, and it was freaking tasty. And what I love about crock-pot meals is you just throw everything in there and you just let things cook, and you can be totally lazy about it and then enjoy all the rewards after just total laziness. It's freaking awesome. So what I wanted to do was take that recipe and turn it into a taco recipe because it really is something worth trying. So if you were interested in checking out that recipe, be sure to check out the show notes before you leave the episode today. All right. Let's go ahead and dive into this week's topic, which I mentioned is how I became a world champ. I wish that there was a podcast that was like this with some of the information that I'm about to divulge. I really do wish that these are things that I had heard a year ago when I was on the trek to where it is that I am now. But I also don't regret any of it because it was awesome getting to learn the lessons that I'm about to teach you today in the ways that I got to learn them and how it's building me now and how I'm able to pay it forward to you guys a whole year later after, really putting in the work. And now the proof is in the pudding that the things that are coming out of my mouth and the things that I'm preaching, they work. And if you just focus on them and you eliminate the noise, amazing things are going to happen for you. And I also want to mention this too, because this is all about how I became a world champ within my own respect within the Deca arena. I also want to recognize that being a champion is not all about winning. A champion is so much more than that. And I want you to know that there is a champion within each of you it's just waiting to be let out. Again, a champion is not about how much you win and about how many podiums you stand on top of, but it's how you choose to show up for yourself in this lifetime. It's about how you choose to also show up for others and how you choose to make an impact in this lifetime. And so while I'm going to go through and talk through a lot of the things that allowed for me to stand on top of a podium a couple weekends ago, I want you to realize that the things that I'm going to tell you are just the things for you to really live life to the fullest potential, to really help you become the most authentic version of you and be able to look back on your life being like, I accomplished the things that I never thought that I could, and I'm so freaking proud of myself, and therefore I am the champion of this life, right? I just wanted to mention that because it's not always about winning the gold. It's about being the best you that you can possibly be and then allowing for that person to give back in such incredible ways. I truly believe that. So with that being said, there are 5 things that I truly believe helped me become a champion. And the first thing that I want to talk about is this idea of training and how much you train, and specifically talk about the overtraining debate. Because I can tell you that last year when I was going into World Championships, I was training multiple times a day, all the way up until the actual championship itself. And by the time that I even got there, I probably had already burned my last match to the point where I couldn't really give what it is that I needed to give. There was a lot of other things that were on top of that, but the reason why I want to talk about this is, I was talking to a couple of athletes who had the opportunity to stand on top of the podium at DECA Worlds, and I just was curious and asking them and what they thought the difference maker was this year, like what really allowed for them to get to this point. And there was some talk around, well, I did 2-a-days every single day. I really worked hard and I put in so much training hours, and that's the reason why I was able to do the thing. And just even after the fact, just people saying like, those 2-a-days were worth it, like all of these different things just around how much they put their body through. I don't want to say that was not a reason as to why they were able to be successful, because everyone has their own training methodology that leads to their own confidence that they mentally need to carry with them into that race, right? But I am just going to say, personally speaking to me and how I train myself and my athletes, is I think that we overtrain often. I think that we do too much. And the approach that I really wanted to take going into this back half of the season to this build of World Championships was not how much could I do, but how intentional could I get, right? How could I really focus on taking care of myself versus beating myself into the ground in order to get the results that I wanted to get? And here's just what I want to say about this overall just overtraining idea and the debate around it, is that the people that are able to train multiple times a day and do that multiple times a week, I'm not, again, saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that the people that can do that and should do that are the people that are paid to do that, right? The people that athletics is their professional job. They literally get paid to perform and stand on top of podiums, right? Meaning that they have a lot of rest and recovery time. They have the modalities to recover the best. They're fueling their body in a specific way. Their stress levels are low. They're getting 10 hours of sleep a night. Like, there are very different logistical things that go along with the lifestyle that they get to live. And here's the thing. I'm a personal trainer. I am up at 4 a.m. and I don't get home until 9 p.m. at night because I have people early in the morning and people late at night. That's when people are training. And so to work that schedule and then to think about how am I going to maximize my time in a way to become a world champion, knowing that I can't train 7 hours a day because my recovery time is just not there. My ability to recover is just not there. Those were things I had to get incredibly real on. And I think people kind of get it twisted a little bit. They get it twisted that they have to do more and then realize all they're doing is beating themselves into the ground. So again, when it's time to go and burn their matches, they've already burnt their last match and they have nothing left to give to the big occasion. Or they end up sick or they end up injured. I can't tell you how many people were sick and how many people got injured like 2 weekends ago. People left and right were like, oh, this is going down. This is going down. And it's merely a byproduct of how we lead up to this. So all of that to say, you guys, as you start to approach this year, I really want you to think about and just start to trust in the fact that you don't need to do 1,000,000 hours of training to be the greatest, right? If you've got the time and the luxury to do it and to recover like a freaking champ, then do it. But if not, don't feel this need and this pressure to do it in that way. It can be done in other ways. And I trained, except for the days where I taught classes and had to work out in those classes because I was teaching them, I only trained once a day. And those were 4 maybe really good quality days. One day that was just active recovery. and another day that was probably some sort of active recovery, right? If I did a full week of training, there was a lot of active recovery that came within that. So I wasn't putting in several hours of training to get to this point. I just really wanted to drive that message home. So I hope that makes sense. And that honestly leads me to the next thing is, again, I stopped thinking about how much I needed to do and started thinking about how can I become more intentional with my time and my energy and my efforts. One thing that I really had to do when it came to intentionality and intentionality around training is I had to put on my blinders. I had to put on my horsey flaps and not become worried with what other athletes that I would be competing against. Inevitably, I was not trying to get worried about what they were doing. The mistake that I made last year was merely in the fact that I would sit there and watch what all of my competitors were doing, thinking that I wasn't doing enough or that I needed to do more of what they were doing, and I wasn't staying true to myself and what it is that I actually needed to do to get myself in the right physical and mental space to actually go out there and put on the best performance, right? So one thing that I did to make sure that I stayed very intentional to the energy and efforts that I wanted to put into this training is I stopped following certain people on Instagram and Facebook. I put people on mute so that way I wasn't constantly seeing their training updates and their posts, because I knew the moment that I started to see those is the moment that I was going to dwindle. And this happened, you guys. Even after I started doing that, I started getting sent like certain stories and posts from other athletes of like, look at what this person is doing. And immediately it struck a chord and it set me into the wrong space. And so this is a call, you guys, to not only get intentional about how you're spending your time, like when it comes to the training hours that you're putting in, but also the time outside of the gym. The time where you're sitting at home and you're bored and you're just in the, mindless scroll. What are you consuming? Because I can tell you what you're consuming is going to impact you so much mentally, and that's either going to make or break you when you step up to the starting line. I can promise you that. The decision to let go of what other people were doing and constantly feeling like I had to keep up with the Joneses and just focus in on myself, get really intentional about what are the things that I needed physically and mentally to win. When I got to that starting line, you guys, I had so much peace. It was unreal how peaceful I was at the starting line each time. I had smiles, I was dancing, I was giggling. I just was so internally locked into what I needed to do and just trusting in that. And I know that came from living in my own journey and not trying to live someone else's journey over the last 6 to 8 weeks of training into World Championships. So when you think about intentionality, I want you to think about this in a 360 facet. It's everything. Being intentional about the things that you're consuming, about the people that you're choosing to listen to and have mentor you, to how you're actually moving your body and what you're doing in those training sessions, right? So think about those things. Don't leave any one of those details out, because I promise you, if you focus on all three, you're gonna see a difference the next time that you step up to the starting line. The next thing of how I became a world champ is when I was doing races. So like when I would go and do like a local affiliate event, or I'd fly out to Connecticut to do races. Yes, of course I wanted to do well. Of course I wanted to, PR and put up a really good qualifying time. Like some of these things that I traveled out for, like I had to put up a good qualifying time. Otherwise I'd miss my shot essentially to race in the elite wave. So there was that pressure there. But the way that I really started to approach racing, especially in the back half of the year, was I was racing to gather data versus to hit PRs or specific performance expectations. That mentality alone of being able to draw that line in the sand of being like, I do this. This is what I do. And I know that I'm going to finish regardless. I'm not doing this with any expectation. I'm doing this I'm on the hunt right now. I'm putting on my learner's mentality cap, and I want to see what I can learn over the next 15 minutes of doing this race of what's working and what's just not going to work. And that removed so much pressure off of my shoulders to do well or to hit a specific outcome. And I can tell you, when you're in the middle of a race and you're like, oh, I expect for this to go really, really well, and then it doesn't, it is one of the hardest things in the world to reroute and be like, everything's okay. I am just going to adapt. The only way actually that you can get better at that is going in with the right mentality. And I believe this idea of racing to gather data versus hit PRs is a really strong way to do that. And when you do that more often, you're able to work on those repetitions of just, I'm not here to put pressure on myself, but I'm here to adapt. I'm here to learn. And you free yourself from this pressure. And now you're able to think clearly while you're racing. And it was so awesome, you guys. I'll tell you this. Granted, when I was at World Championships, there was no gathering of data. This was the time to go. This was the time to just zone out, go into my flow, have some fun, and freaking hit it. But when I was doing my Elite Strong, this is the race that I have been waiting and preparing for all season. When I was on the ski erg, I felt myself incredibly fatigued. And this is the station that is one of the hardest ones for me because I'm not as tall. I don't have as much mass as some of these other girls. Like, that is the erg that I struggle. I'd probably say that's the zone I struggle on the most out of all 10. It's not that I hate it. It's just I'm not as good as it in comparison to the rest of the field. And so I felt myself slipping back in my pace and I was really fatigued. And in that moment, I had a decision. I had a decision to either freak myself out and say, this is not my day, or I had a decision to adapt. And the way that I was able to adapt was thinking, okay, clearly I'm not able to hit my race pace that I've originally strategized. I'm going to go back to plan B that I know that I can execute on because I've done it before. Because all these other races that I've done, I've learned from. And I was really intentional about being present during those races and thinking about what was happening. And so I was able to so easily slide over and just say, okay, I'm just going to make a small pivot. I'm going to pull this back just by a few seconds and everything's going to be okay. I'm going to bring my heart rate down. I'm going to take the next station. I'm going to take Farmer's Carry I'm going to conserve my energy. And then when I get to the bike, I'm going to do what I know how to do. And I'm going to pour everything into it. Because after that, at that point, there's only 3 stations left. They're the 3 of the stations that I'm arguably really strong at. Out of all the parts of the race, these are the 3 to 4 stations that I'm arguably the most strong at. I'm a back half racer. So I just want to get to that point where I know that I can just let it all out. And if I end up not being able to do the thing, then whatever. But I want to set myself up in order to do that. Guys, this would not have happened if I did not spend my time in the months leading up to this race racing with the mentality of gathering data and therefore being so zoned into what I was doing versus letting my mind wander to all the things that didn't matter. I had so much data and what I had already learned that I was able to use it on the fly in that moment and not freak out. And what happened there, you guys, I'm telling you, I was one of the last people off the ski erg. I think I was one of the last people to the bike. There was 15 of us. I came off in 6th. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal, right? So I can't say this enough. If there's anything that you can change about going into this upcoming season is, yes, still you want to perform in a way to do well, but you want to think about the way that you're racing in a completely different mentality. Think about, what is it that I can learn? What strategy can I test out in this specific race that therefore is going to give me the data that I need to perform better on the next race? It will bring so much joy, so much presence, and just take off so much pressure out of your racing. Okay, last few here. The next thing that helped me become a world champion, I stayed authentic to me. It's plain and simple as that. When I was there, one thing that I noticed is I was one of the only people, especially in the elite field, that was smiling. And I didn't just smile because I wanted to be that face. I smiled and I giggled and I danced and I was full of energy everywhere within that arena because that's just who I am. And I wasn't going to let the pressure of the situation, I wasn't going to let the field that I was racing against, and I'll tell you what, I definitely wasn't going to let the fact that I had just won a world champion title in the Deca Mile co-ed teams with my coach. I was not going to let that impact how I was going to race the next day by having this ego or changing who it was that I showed up as on the start line. I refused, right? I was also cool as a freaking cucumber. Like, guys, the first race of Sunday was the ruck, and if you heard the story from last week, I was incredibly sick, stomach in knots, no bueno, right? I remember being on the rower, and the guy that was coaching me and judging me was like, "Hey, you're falling back. You're falling back. Like, your pace is getting slower." And I remember just looking him and just smiling, being like, "Hey, I appreciate you, but I know what I'm doing." Right? And I was so cool. And people literally thought that I was falling asleep throughout majority of the race. They were like, "You were not breathing heavy until the end at the burpees, maybe on the tank." And I was like, yeah, because I know how to race this race. I know how to stay calm under pressure, especially when I'm not feeling well. It was so cool to be able to just stay authentic to me in that space and not have to get all riled up based off of, again, what was going on around me. And it's also because that's just what I've practiced all year. I was really proud of myself, honestly, the fact that I wasn't nervous at the starting line. During the mile, the very first race that I did, I was, ready to get the jitters out. But every other race, I was just so comfortable and just happy and at peace and so trusting with what it was that I knew how to do and that I was going to be able to execute it. And that all came, you guys, because of the things that I mentioned before this, because of the ability to stay intentional during the last 6 to 8 weeks during the build, because I didn't overtrain. I was able to actually show up feeling my best during those days, right? And not have to worry about overcoming that mental block. And I had spent so much time gathering data to the point where, again, I was just so trusting of the entire process. So those 3 things alone allowed for me to really dive into this 4th thing, which is staying authentic to myself while I raced. I was able to race my own race and not someone else's race. And when you do that, it feels so good and you unlock so much potential. So much potential. So I want you to think about, who is the most authentic version of you? Think about the person that you want to show up on the starting line. And who's the person that you want to cross every single finish line that you're going to cross next year? Who is that person? How do they act? How do they interact with other people? What do they do? What do they represent? What is the legacy that they leave? Those are the things that I want you to think about. And that is who I want you to stay as authentic to as possible throughout every single race setting that you can. Because when you do, your best performance are waiting for you on the other side. I can promise you that. Okay? All right. The last thing, the 5th final thing that has allowed for me to become a world champion is I decided to finally ask for help, and I stopped trying to do it alone. I've been very forthcoming about my story from last year when I was at World Championships and I watched Kevin Gregory win several titles, and I watched him and his team and the energy that they cultivated, the dominance that they had, but just the love, the passion, the heart that was behind the team. It was a true family. And I just remember how badly I wanted that. But I was scared, and I just thought I wasn't worth his time, that I wasn't worth it, truly. And I got out of my own way, and I said, I want to work with you. And when I heard the price to work with the best of the best, I continued to get out of my own way. And I said, I am worth it, and I'm not going to allow for myself to experience another year of mediocrity because I'm choosing to let ego and fears around financials get in the way. Now, I know not everyone can say that, and quite honestly, I wasn't in a space to say that. But I was so trusting that if I pushed myself to really be coached by the best, that good things were going to happen for me, and I was going to be able to handle whatever came on the other side. So I've shared that story before, but this wasn't just about working with Kevin, that courageous step to work with Kevin. This was also about how I showed up all year long. All year long, I seeked out guidance, and I had this learner's mentality cap on. I remember at the very beginning of the year when I had my very first clean put into a workout, and I had never done one before. I was like, what in the hell is this thing? I don't know how. I remember that. And I remember posting about it of just like, hey, I'm trying this thing and I think I got the hang of it. One of my buddies, who is now one of my best friends, Mr. AJ, he was like, hey, I'm reaching out with the best intentions here. I would love to help you if you're willing. And when you are just like courageously posting things online, it's scary, right? Because you get a lot of backlash. You sometimes get the assholes that are like, hey, you didn't do that right and you suck. So you risk a lot by putting things out there like that. And so I didn't take it as like, oh my gosh, this person's out to get me or I should be ashamed. I took it as like, I'm getting help. This is awesome. I no longer have to do this alone. And each time that he reached out or each time someone else reached out and was like, hey, maybe try this or do that, just with anything, I grew. I also, like I said, I got out of my own way and thought, okay, I can't race the race like this because this is what's been in my head. But what if I could? What if I go out there and research? What if I ask the questions? Take the time to learn. I wonder if something will change, if I'll learn something from it. And I was able to. So this year should be all about, and not just even this year, every single year, every moment that you can, you guys, should be about getting out of your own way, thinking that you have to do this alone and allowing for yourself to welcome in learning, to welcome in guidance. It's game changing when you do. And I want to pitch this for you guys because I'm super passionate about this, is we just put out applications for the Underdog Fitness 2025 Podium Chasers team. This is the team that I was a part of this last year and will continue to be a part of probably until the day that I stop racing. And this team is all about leveling up and bringing family, community, networking, support to sport. It's freaking amazing. Not only do you get to work with the best of the best and the most talented athletes and trainers in the world, but you also get to be a part of that culture where you're just constantly leveling up together and having deeper conversations that are so much more than the surface level conversations will get you. If you are interested in, again, truly being great and not sitting there and having another mediocre year of results, I really hope that you take the opportunity to apply for this. Go to Instagram, go to Underdog Fitness, click on their link, and you will find the application. You have until December 28th to do it. And I promise you, you do not want to miss your chance to do this, okay? This is where I want to leave you for today. To be a champion, you just have to compete. To be a great champion, you just have to compete with the best. But to be the greatest champion of all you have to do is compete with yourself. To become the best champion that you can be, all you have to do is go internal with these 5 steps that I gave you today. And I promise you that it's going to change the game for you completely. Thank you guys so much for showing up for you today. And before you leave the episode, I need for you to hear this exciting announcement as far as what's going on with the podcast moving into 2025. I was sitting down a couple days ago and I realized that the podcast has evolved. What was once something that was a mission to help people make smarter and healthier choices over COVID while everyone was locked up at home, and a way to reach people to have conversations about life to make sure that they didn't feel alone. While that's been really special, that's not what the podcast has been about as of recent. It has been about mental shifts. It has been about growth. It has been about getting out of the comfort zone and getting really good at getting uncomfortable. So with that being said, the podcast is going to be evolving. In 2025, Taco About a Tuesday will no longer be the theme of the podcast. Instead, we are going to be evolving the podcast into Becoming Your Strong. Becoming Your Strong is something that I am so passionate about because it puts the focus on the most important thing, you and your unique journey. Everyone has their own definition of strong and their own way of getting there, and I want to help you do that by focusing on what's most important to you, what's most important in this life, and what's going to help you get to what it is that you really, really want. So get ready. In 2025, this podcast is going to be shifting to Becoming Your Strong, and I am so excited to bring you along in the next part of this journey with me. But until then, you guys, we have one more week of Taco About It Tuesday. I will bring you one killer taco before this ride ends. And then I'll see you guys in the new year for a brand new series of Becoming Your Strong. See you guys then.